Section 58 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune, Section 58. Madame Beck called me on Thursday afternoon and asked whether I had any occupation to hinder me from going into town and executing some little commissions for her at the shops. Being disengaged and placing myself at her service, I was presently furnished with a list of the wools, silks, embroidering thread, etc., wanted in the pupil's work, and having equipped myself in a manner suiting the threatening aspect of a cloudy and sultry day, I was just drawing the spring bolt of the street door in act to issue forth, when Madame's voice again summoned me to the salle à manger. "Pardon, Miss Lucy," cried she, in the seeming haste of an impromptu thought. "I have just recollected one more errand for you, if your good nature will not deem itself overburdened." Of course I confounded myself in asseverations to the contrary, and Madame, running into the little salon, brought thence a pretty basket filled with fine hothouse fruit, rosy, perfect, and tempting, reposing amongst the dark green wax-like leaves and pale yellow stars of I know not what exotic plant. "There," she said, "it is not heavy, and will not shame your neat toilette, as if it were a household servant-like detail. Do me the favour to leave this little basket at the house of Madame Walravens, with my felicitations on her fate. She lives down in the old town, numero 3, Rue des Marges. I fear you will find the walk rather long, but you have the whole afternoon before you, and do not hurry. If you are not back in time for dinner, I will order a portion to be saved, or Goton, with whom you are a favourite, will have pleasure in tossing up some trifle for your especial benefit. You shall not be forgotten, ma bonne Miss, and oh, please," calling me back once more, "be sure to insist on seeing Madame Walravens herself, and giving the basket into her own hands, in order that there may be no mistake, for she is rather a punctilious personage. Adieu, au revoir." And at last I got away. The shop commissions took some time to execute, that choosing and matching of silks and wools being always a tedious business, but at last I got through my list. The patterns for the slippers, the bell ropes, the cabas were selected, the slides and tassels for the purses chosen, the whole tripotage, in short, was off my mind. Nothing but the fruit and the felicitations remained to be attended to. I rather liked the prospect of a long walk, deep into the old and grim Bassville, and I liked it no worse because the evening sky over the city was settling into a mass of black-blue metal, heated at the rim, and inflaming slowly to a heavy red. I fear a high wind, because storm demands that exertion of strength and use of action I always yield with pain, but the sullen downfall, the thick snow descent, or dark rush of rain, ask only resignation, the quiet abandonment of garments and person to be drenched. In return, it sweeps a great capital clean before you. It makes you a quiet path through broad grand streets. It petrifies a living city, as if by Eastern enchantment it transforms a Villette into a Tadmor. Let then the rains fall and the floods descend, only I must first get rid of this basket of fruit. An unknown clock from an unknown tower, Jean-Baptiste's voice was now too distant to be audible, was tolling the 3rd quarter past 5, when I reached that street and house whereof Madame Beck had given me the address. It was no street at all. It seemed rather to be part of a square. It was quiet. Grass grew between the broad grey flags. The houses were large and looked very old. Behind them rose the appearance of trees, indicating gardens at the back. Antiquity brooded above this region. Business was banished thence. Rich men had once possessed this quarter, and once grandeur had made her seat here. That church, whose dark, half-ruinous turrets overlooked the square, was the venerable and formerly opulent shrine of the Magi. But wealth and greatness had long since stretched their gilded pinions and fled hence, leaving these their ancient nests, perhaps to house penury for a time, or perhaps to stand cold and empty, mouldering untenanted in the course of winters. As I crossed this deserted place, on whose pavement drops almost as large as a 5-franc piece were now slowly darkening, I saw in its whole expanse no symptom or evidence of life, except what was given in the figure of an infirm old priest who went past, bending and propped on a staff, the type of eld and decay. He had issued from the very house to which I was directed, and when I paused before the door just closed after him and rang the bell, he turned to look at me, nor did he soon avert his gaze. Perhaps he thought me, with my basket of summer fruit and my lack of the dignity age confers, an incongruous figure in such a scene. I know, had a young ruddy-faced bonne opened the door to admit me, I should have thought such a one little in harmony with her dwelling, but when I found myself confronted by a very old woman wearing a very antique peasant costume, a cap alike hideous and costly, with long flaps of native lace, a petticoat and jacket of cloth, and sabots more like little boats than shoes, it seemed all right and soothingly in character. The expression of her face was not quite so soothing as the cut of her costume. Anything more cantankerous I have seldom seen. She would scarcely reply to my inquiry after Madame Walraven's. I believe she would have snatched the basket of fruit from my hand, had not the old priest, hobbling up, checked her, and himself lent an ear to the message with which I was charged. His apparent deafness rendered it a little difficult to make him fully understand that I must see Madame Walravens and consign the fruit into her own hands. At last, however, he comprehended the fact that such were my orders, and that duty enjoined their literal fulfilment. Addressing the aged bonne, not in French, but in the aboriginal tongue of Labassecour, he persuaded her, at last, to let me cross the inhospitable threshold, and himself escorting me upstairs, I was ushered into a sort of salon, and there left. The room was large, and had a fine old ceiling, and almost church-like windows of coloured glass, but it was desolate, and in the shadow of a coming storm looked strangely lowering. Within opened a smaller room. There, however, the blind of the single casement was closed. Through the deep gloom few details of furniture were apparent. These few I amused myself by puzzling to make out, and in particular I was attracted by the outline of a picture on the wall. By and by the picture seemed to give way. To my bewilderment, it shook, it sunk, it rolled back into nothing. Its vanishing left an opening arched, leading into an arched passage with a mystic winding stair. Both passage and stair were of cold stone, uncarpeted and unpainted. Down this donjon stair descended a tap-tap like a stick. Soon there fell on the steps a shadow, and last of all I was aware of a substance. Yet was it actual substance? This appearance approaching me, this obstruction partially darkening the arch? It drew near, and I saw it well. I began to comprehend where I was. Well might this old square be named Quarter of the Magi. Well might the 3 towers, overlooking it, own for godfathers 3 mystic sages of a dead and dark art. Hoar enchantment here prevailed. A spell had opened for me elfland. That cell-like room, that vanishing picture, that arch and passage, and stair of stone, were all parts of a fairy tale. Distincter even than these scenic details stood the chief figure, Cunegonde, the sorceress, Malevola, the evil fairy. How was she? She might be 3 feet high, but she had no shape. Her skinny hands rested upon each other, and pressed the gold knob of a wand-like ivory staff. Her face was large, set not upon her shoulders, but before her breast. She seemed to have no neck. I should have said there were 100 years in her features, and more perhaps in her eyes. Her malign, unfriendly eyes, with thick grey brows above, and livid lids all round. How severely they viewed me, with a sort of dull displeasure. This being wore a gown of brocade, dyed bright blue, full tinted as the gentianella flower, and covered with satin foliage in a large pattern. Over the gown a costly shawl, gorgeously bordered, and so large for her that its many-coloured fringe swept the floor. But her chief points were her jewels. She had long, clear earrings, blazing with a lustre which could not be borrowed or false. She had rings on her skeleton hands, with thick gold hoops and stones, purple, green, and blood-red. Hunchbacked, dwarfish, and doting, she was adorned like a barbarian queen. "Que me voulez-vous?" said she hoarsely, with the voice rather of male than of female old age, and indeed the silver beard bristled her chin. I delivered my basket and my message. "Is that all?" she demanded. "It is all," said I. "Truly it was well worth while," she answered. "Return to Madame Beck and tell her I can buy fruit when I want it. Et quant à ces félicitations, je m'en moque." And this courteous dame turned her back. Just as she turned, a peal of thunder broke, and a flash of lightning blazed broad over salon and boudoir. The tale of magic seemed to proceed with due accompaniment of the elements. The wanderer, decoyed into the enchanted castle, heard rising outside the spell-wakened tempest. What in all this was I to think of Madame Beck? She owned strange acquaintance. She offered messages and gifts at an unique shrine, and inauspicious seemed the bearing of the uncouth thing she worshipped. There went that sullen Sidonia, tottering and trembling like palsy incarnate, tapping her ivory staff on the mosaic parquet, and muttering venomously as she vanished. Down washed the rain, deep blurred the welkin. The clouds, ruddy a while ago, had now, through all their blackness, turned deadly pale, as if in terror. Notwithstanding my late boast about not fearing a shower, I hardly liked to go out under this water-spout. Then the gleams of lightning were very fierce, the thunder crashed very near. This storm had gathered immediately above Villette. It seemed to have burst at the zenith. It rushed down prone. The forked slant bolts pierced athwart vertical torrents. Red zigzags interlaced a descent blanched as white metal, and all broke from a sky heavily black in its swollen abundance. End of section 58. Recording by Leanne Fortune.